LiberalViewer presents.
So, welcome to the May 23rd edition of LiberalViewer Monday Media Mixup. Thanks for joining me. I'll be using the 10 best, most newsworthy clips I picked out from the Sunday morning news analysis shows from the big five corporate outlets. Well, four of the big five corporate outlets. NBC is not part of it. It's ABC, CBS, CNN, and Fox News. Because, the Meet the Press slogan is, if it's Sunday, it's Premier Soccer. No, that's not their slogan. But anyway, all the other four will be in there. So it's the so-called corporate media here in the United States, for which it'd be an informative, educational, fair use media criticism and political commentary show for you all today. You can see my title topic is, Will Bad Biden Economy Elect Crazy Republicans? Which is kind of putting together two topics that I've been covering for, a lot of the 51 episodes. I guess next week it'll be like the 1 year anniversary, or the 52-week anniversary anyway. And one is problems with the economy coming out of COVID with, inflation, and there is like a lot of job openings, but not people to fill them. And now there's the whole baby formula thing, and gas prices, of course, is part of inflation. Anyway, that'll be like part of the topic. But then also with the upcoming midterms, it's the Republican Party is going so like crazy, and the bad economy is making it more likely that those crazy Republicans will get elected. So now you, like you needed the topic explained, that is the topic of the video. And for the bad economy part of the topic, I'll have a newsmaker clip of Brian Dees, the director of the National Economic Council in the Biden administration. And then for the crazy Republicans, well, later in the newsmaker clips, I'll have the Republican National Committee Chair Ronna Romney McDaniel, although she dropped the Romney a long time ago, and then Florida Senator Rick Scott, kind of talking both about inflation and about crazy Republicans. But for my political comedy, it's like another kind of crazy Republican thing. I don't know if you saw this on the Twitter, or if you saw it on social media, but this is the Republican senator from Louisiana, talking about the maternal mortality rate in Louisiana at this Harvard School of Public Health forum. In fact, if you want to see the whole thing in context, I put a link under sources in the video description to where you can see the entire interview he gave. And this really isn't out of context. I'll explain a little more context. Remember, this is Dr. Bill Cassidy. He's one of the four doctors in the Senate. So he's not like totally uninformed on the issue of maternal mortality. But he uses the verb corrected, or the word correct, in a very dubious way in this clip. And then the phrase "for some reason" is doing a lot of work in the clip I will talk about with you a little more after we watch it together over here.
Louisiana, about a third of our population is African American. African Americans have a higher incidence of maternal mortality. So if you correct our population for race, we're not as much of an outlier as it would otherwise appear. Now, I say that not to minimize the issue, but to focus the issue as to where it would be. For whatever reason, people of color have a higher incidence of maternal mortality.
So, for some reason I couldn't hear the clip when it was playing. I was having a little problem. That's why I was a little slow there. But that I assume you all could hear the clip, right? I'm not sure why I couldn't hear the clip while it was playing. If you couldn't hear the clip, then let me know in the comments section. But I don't know if I'm looking in the comment section. I'm having problems telling if you could actually hear what he said. No, but he's like talking about correcting. If you correct for the fact that a third of the population is black in Louisiana, then they don't have such a bad maternal mortality rate. I thought he used the word correct in there. And then, now you're all saying that you heard it. And then he used the phrase, for some reason, and it didn't really, there is a part later in the interview where he talks about maybe we should study if it's racism, but that's kind of the ridiculous part also. And I think there was a Vanity Fair headline that like something about like the maternal mortality rate in Louisiana isn't so bad if you leave out all the black people or something like that. Anyway, I thought that was a pretty comical thing for a politician to say because, like I said, in context, he talks about some of the causes like preeclampsia, the high blood pressure problem that pregnant women have that's more prevalent amongst black women, and he talks about maybe studying racism. So it's not completely as uninformed as it sounded in that clip, which I wish I'd been able to watch with you. And hopefully, I don't know what happened. I have some problems with my earbuds or... Anyway, I'll hopefully when I get to this next clip is also very short because then I saw Senator Bill Cassidy was on America's Newsroom this morning being interviewed by Dana Perino, and actually you'll see that in the background during the bonus Dash clip I'm going to show you a little at the end of the program. I actually have Dash licking my plate after I ate something, sort of looking up at the TV, watching part of this interview. But apparently was a great interview, even though Dana Perino, I thought she was going to have Bill Cassidy on to because she was going to be like a friendly interviewer to let him kind of clean up his ridiculous statement in that first clip I showed you. But no, that wasn't what happened. She never asked him about it at all, even asked him about infant formula, about energy problems. And how do I know they still think it was a great interview? Well, you can see here's the end of the interview this morning over here.
You're here, and you're going to be talking about this to groups and trying to get the message out on energy and the China piece. It's critical, and that's where the president is in Asia today, hopefully talking about it as well. Yeah. Thanks for being here. Good to see you in person.
Thank you.
All right. Jillian?
Great interview, Dana. Just days after the primary election.
See, great interview, Dana. And that time I could hear the clip. I don't know why I couldn't hear the first clip with you. That was kind of disturbing. That I can always watch. That's one of the things I like. I'm watching the clips with you, and I couldn't watch it with you. And I don't know. I almost feel like I should go back and play it again, but I'm not going to. I'm going to get to the news summaries. And the longest news summary, well, this isn't even the entire news summary because I cut off this is CBS News Face the Nation with Margaret Brennan, and then their pollster, Anthony Salvanto. And this is like one of the weird biases I've talked about that all the news media have, where if they have a new poll, somehow that is like the biggest news of the week for their, their flagship news program on Sunday mornings. And I wanted to play and normally I'll even cut out the whole Anthony Salvanto part where he talks about their poll results, but it's important because I'm going to play it all the way through the results that Senator Rick Scott of Florida refers to later in clip 9. This is clip 3. But that's one of the reasons I play you some of these news summaries is because the newsmakers who watch them later, or who I show the clips of later, have watched them and will often respond to what's in the news summaries. And like I said, Rick Scott responds to one of the numbers, or some of the numbers, but not all of the numbers and then Margaret Brennan brings up some of the other numbers. But anyway, I've talked too much about the numbers. Let's watch the numbers together over here.
Welcome to Face the Nation. I'm Margaret Brennan. Good morning. We've learned that the number of Americans who say things are going badly in this country, particularly with the economy, is at the highest rate it has been during the Biden presidency. 6 out of 10 Americans surveyed feel uneasy or worried about the state of the country. Today, we'll hear from key players in both parties, the head of Senate Republicans' campaign efforts, Florida Senator Rick Scott, and a top House Democrat, New York Congressman Hakeem Jeffries. Plus, we'll take an in-depth look at the state of the economy and talk with former Defense Secretary Robert Gates, who offers a little bit of optimism for us. We begin with our CBS News poll. Joining us now to help us break it down is CBS News Director of Elections and Surveys, Anthony Salvanto. Anthony, good morning. Great to have you here at the table.
Thank you for having me. Great to be here.
Well, you have some fairly pessimistic news for us, I know, but is inflation still the #1 electoral issue for Americans?
So much of this is about inflation. That view of the nation that you described at the top is driven by concerns about inflation. So much of these views of the economy are driven by concerns about inflation. In fact, the number who say that the economy is bad is now the highest it's been during the Biden administration. And then recently, we see people reacting to the drop in the stock market, where now they're pessimistic about both the market and maybe their retirement. So all of that is piling on, and the longer that it goes, you see people becoming more pessimistic that it can be reversed. Having said all that, Margaret, I do need to point out a couple of optimistic things. One is the jobs market. People are optimistic that they can find a job in their area. And then the other part is, you have to say, after 2 years of a pandemic and all the losses, people are starting to feel optimistic about that effort as we head into the summer.
So how are Americans assessing the president's performance?
Well, on inflation, it's not good. His handling of inflation and his ratings for that are low. But there's another component of this, and that is a majority of the public, 2/3, feel like the administration has been slow to react, or slow to react to events as they come up. Of course, that's been a critique on inflation and on other matters. It's also starting to stick a little among his party, among Democrats, who are also now more likely to say that, and then that the economy is bad. So that's tough politically. And, you know, I think coming into this, we saw numbers where people were expecting him to be effective, and now those ratings are low. So it's that setup of expectations here, because people reason backwards from results. If they don't see results on inflation, then he pays a political price.
What about the parties themselves? Do Americans think they're talking enough about the issues that actually matter to them?
Well, in a word, no. You know, you're seeing the party primaries play out in state after state around the country now. And yes, the candidates are forced to speak to their bases in those places, but something that both Democrats and Republicans share is that they want those potential nominees to talk about inflation. And maybe by virtue of the fact that they're not talking about it enough, the parties are actually even on this. The Republicans don't have a large advantage on handling inflation, right? Even though the Democrats are the party in power. But after that, the bases really diverge. You have to point out the Democrats are very concerned about the potential overthrow of Roe v. Wade, and they want their candidates to talk about that and abortion rights. And then the Republicans are having this split, and it's really important as people watch this go forward, over former President Trump. You've got half of Republicans who say they want their candidates to talk about being loyal to the former president. You've got nearly half who say that they want to basically relitigate 2020 and talk about what they feel was a rigged election, even though that's been disproven. So you've got the other half of the Republicans that don't want that. And that's an inter-party fight that you're seeing play out in race after race, state after state right now.
So what we are also seeing here is...
So, yeah, then they go on and talk about how Republicans don't care so much about denouncing white supremacy as Democrats do. And that was something that Margaret Brennan asked Rick Scott about that I'm not going to show you. But I did show you the inflation numbers, and there was an important number there that shows that basically Democrats and Republicans get about the same rating on how people think they're going to handle the economy and inflation. It's like 49-51 at the country split pretty much half and half on that. So even though Biden, because he's president, he gets credit and blame for the economy, even when a lot of things about inflation aren't really in the control of the president. A lot of it has to do, I mean, we've talked about this for over the weeks about how the Fed controls the interest rates, and they slow down the economy by raising interest rates. That takes money out of the economy. Even if you believe in modern monetary theory, that means the government can spend as much as it wants, but if inflation starts, you need to take money out of the economy. You do that by raising taxes or raising interest rates or cutting spending. So those are like the tools that work the best are the interest rate, the money supply, how much money they print, and how much interest they charge banks to borrow the money. So anyway, that was a whole thing. Oh, and I checked the transcript of people. I saw some people in the comments saying they didn't hear Louisiana Senator Bill Cassidy say the word correct, but I have the whole transcript right here. He said, so if you correct our population for race, we're not as much of an outlier as would otherwise appear, talking about maternal mortality. And that's correct our population for race? Is that actually making the population more correct to remove the black people from it? That's kind of the implication of that phrase that I unfortunately didn't listen along with you, and that like threw me off, but that's what I wanted to say about the Bill Cassidy clip. I don't know, it's only 27 seconds. I could play it again, but I'm not going to, because if you want to watch it again, all you have to do is scroll back, especially if you're watching as a recorded show. But I have the live stream set with a DVR setting, so you can actually go back and watch it again, even if you're a live viewer. But anyway, that was the CBS News Face the Nation news summary, where the big news of the week is their poll showing Biden's in trouble, and that isn't so different from the Fox News Sunday news summary, except it's actually, this is Martha MacCallum is the guest host of Fox News Sunday. Chris Wallace is getting his own Sunday evening show on CNN, apparently, after he left Fox News Sunday to go to CNN Plus, and then CNN Plus was killed in the merger with, Discovery Network. But Martha MacCallum is the guest host this week, and she has Alexandria Hoff talking about the Pennsylvania primary. And it's kind of weird. They talk almost completely about the Republican side, except they throw in this one thing about a Democratic member of Congress and this charge that she's anti-Israel, even though they go back and forth. You remember last week that all the nasty charges going back and forth between the Republicans gets no coverage in this obviously biased, not completely journalistic Fox News Sunday news summary from Martha MacCallum and Alexandria Hoff that I will talk about with you a little more after we watch it together over here.
And hello again from Fox News. This morning, there is still no winner in Pennsylvania's Republican Senate race. Still too close to call, likely headed for a recount, even as former President Trump pushes his pick to go ahead and declare victory. That as two southern states brace for their key primaries on Tuesday. And right now, President Biden's on the ground in Asia. He's on a 6-day trip, shoring up U.S.-Pacific relations and hoping to show that he's working to break the supply chain backlog. This against the backdrop of an unpredictable economy here at home. In a moment, we'll speak live with RNC Chairwoman Ronna McDaniel about these hard-fought Republican primaries across the nation. But first, we turn to Alex Hoff, live in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, where the Republican Senate race remains in limbo this Sunday morning. Hi, Alex.
Hi, Martha. Yeah, very much so. Right now, the margin between Dr. Oz and David McCormick is 0.1%. So unless that margin grows to 0.5%, either through mail-in or provisional ballots, then Pennsylvania law requires the Secretary of State to order a recount. Friday, the Allegheny County Board of Elections swore in a review board. They are now tasked with researching at least 1,900 provisional ballots cast on Tuesday. Oz and McCormick campaign representatives may then challenge ballots. Election officials are promising transparency.
Every vote will be counted, and this is probably the tightest, statewide race that I've been a part of.
Campaign reps were also on site at a warehouse in Pittsburgh, where voting data was released from 10 problematic precinct machines.
We can see victory ahead, and it's all because of you. So thank you, Pennsylvania.
When all the votes are tallied, I am confident we will win.
While Oz called for party unity, the man who endorsed him, former President Trump, urged Oz to declare victory Wednesday, even without all the votes counted. Trump also blamed a surprise contender, Kathy Barnett, saying she took votes he feels would have gone to Oz. Like in 2020, mail-in ballots are once again a point of contention. On Friday, a Pennsylvania appeals court ruled in a different case that ballots lacking a written date on the envelope must still be counted. It's unclear how this race will be impacted by the ruling, but McCormick's campaign, which has been slightly favored by mail-in ballots, reached out to counties to make sure they were aware. In response, Oz's campaign released a statement saying his opponent's lawyers are, quote, following the Democrats' playbook. On the Democratic side, another hotly contested race was called Friday. Progressive Summer Lee won the 12th congressional district primary. Now, Lee was endorsed by House Squad members and Senator Bernie Sanders, but her opponents vocalized concern over past statements she made that they called anti-Israel. Martha?
Alex, thank you very much. Alex Hoff reporting from Pittsburgh. Joining us now, RNC Chairwoman Ronna McDaniel.
And I will have a clip of Ronna McDaniel answering a question about something that I was surprised to see reported in the Fox News Sunday News Summary, which you'll see Martha MacCallum raised with Ronna McDaniel. That tweet from Donald Trump saying, "Let's stop counting the votes. Don't let them steal the election from Dr. Oz by continuing to count the votes." Although they didn't really refer to it as a lie. I'm going to show you later the other news networks, of course, refer to like the 2020 election theft conspiracy theory as a lie. ABC does that really well in a news summary I'm going to show after the rest of the news summaries, because it wasn't their beginning news summary. The beginning news summary is Martha Raddatz talking about like a whole bunch of different issues. This is with Mary. They have Mary Bruce also as their reporter with Joe Biden on his trip to Asia. So they talk about the Asia trip, which didn't really make it into the Fox News Sunday news summary. They talk about the military airlift of the baby formula, Biden's new take on China plan, the threats from North Korea, the ongoing confrontation with Russia over the invasion of Ukraine. And then Martha Raddatz gets this like great exclusive interview with, or actually like ride along on a nuclear submarine, which looks like the U.S. military is putting out there to remind Russia, like, hey, don't forget we have these. And you'll see at the very end of this news summary that I will, or it's partway through the news summary, because I think they actually go to Ian Panel in Ukraine, but I'm going to, since I'm only showing you the first reporter, that's been my practice since the invasion of Ukraine when they have multiple reporters. And I'll talk about the ABC News this week with George Stephanopoulos news summary with permanent co-host or whatever Martha Raddatz's title is. It should be like person with really good contacts and sources in the military, but who also sometimes acts as kind of like a spokesperson for the military. I've talked about this so many times over the years. Martha Raddatz, she gets good access, she asks good questions, but sometimes she's there kind of to carry their message, like this week she did, which I'll talk about a little more after we watch that together over here.
And welcome to This Week. As we come on the air this morning, an unprecedented mission for the U.S. military, bringing a critical supply of baby formula to the U.S. The situation so urgent, President Biden invoked the Defense Production Act to ramp up production. The Operation Fly Formula flight landing in Indianapolis this morning after departing from Ramstein Air Base in Germany. President Biden, meanwhile, is in Japan after spending the past 2 days in South Korea for Biden's first trip to Asia as president. It comes at a crucial moment as the U.S. faces the most serious nuclear challenge since the Cold War. North Korea appears to be on the cusp of a nuclear test, its first since 2017. And in Ukraine, where the Russia offensive continues to stall, Vladimir Putin has threatened the use of nuclear weapons, a threat made more acute by Finland and Sweden moving quickly to join NATO. This morning, with the president in Asia, we will look carefully at the stakes in what is being dubbed a new Cold War, with exclusive access to the most powerful nuclear deterrent in the U.S. arsenal. But first, reports from our team on the ground overseas. Ian Panel is near Dnipro, and we begin with Mary Bruce traveling with the president in Tokyo. Good morning, Mary.
Good morning, Martha. Well, the president just arrived here in Tokyo, the second stop of this trip, Biden's first to Asia as president. It is a trip aimed at strengthening key relationships, curbing the rise of China and taking on the nuclear threat from North Korea. Biden just spent 3 days in South Korea, assuring the new president there that the U.S. will help him confront their nuclear-armed neighbor. Biden announcing they could expand joint military exercises. And he says he is still willing to meet with Kim Jong-un. But the president says he will only do so if Kim is serious and if they can meet in good faith. But Kim, of course, has shown no willingness to talk. In fact, quite the opposite. He has been ramping up his provocations. The White House, in fact, saying that he could launch yet another long-range missile or even conduct a nuclear test while Biden is still here in the region. But the president says he is not concerned, that they are prepared for whatever North Korea may do. And Biden was asked what his message would be to Kim. Martha, he responded simply, hello, period.
Very abrupt, but this trip is coming as the administration is still very focused on the war in Ukraine. Why go to Asia now?
Yeah, this is a trip that Biden probably would have liked to have taken sooner were it not for the pandemic. Biden, of course, came into office promising that taking on China would be a top priority. That goal, of course, has been largely overshadowed recently by the war in Ukraine. So this trip is really a chance for the president to reassert that commitment and that goal. Now, the president will now spend the next 2 days here in Tokyo meeting with leaders of Japan, Australia, and India, and announcing a new joint economic framework, again, aimed at trying to take on the rise of China. Martha.
Thanks, Mary. And Ian, we learned this morning that the administration is trying to get that $40 billion worth of aid into Ukraine as fast as possible.
Yeah, that's right. Good morning, Martha.
So you see there, then ABC decided to go to a reporter in, I think it was Dnipro, Ukraine, after the report from Tokyo. But neither of those is, though, I was talking about the report that Martha Raddatz teased there about the nuclear deterrence, that patrolling the seas. Or actually, I saw how the way ABC News uploaded this to their YouTube channel. Here, check it out. Here's a screenshot of it. U.S. nuclear deterrent patrols the world's ocean. Do you think that was a message that Martha Raddatz just got out there for the U.S. military? I think it was, but you can let me know what you think in the comment section. And now I have the shortest of the news summaries, CNN's State of the Union with Dana Bash as it's Jake Tapper and Dana Bash switch off being hosts of the program, but it was Jake Tapper who started the tradition of begin the program by saying, what is the State of the Union this week? And I know you're all wondering, so I will play that minute and 16 seconds and talk about it a little more after we watch it together over here.
Good morning. I'm Dana Bash in Washington, where the state of our union is feeling anxious. President Biden is in Japan on his first trip to Asia since taking office. But as he tries to focus on his international agenda, problems are piling up back home. The first planes from Operation Fly Formula arrived today as the administration scrambles to get baby formula back onto U.S. shelves. But the White House still has not offered a time frame for when families would begin to see the effects of these measures. Anyone watching their 401k Friday might have regretted looking as the markets continue their longest sell-off in decades, dipping briefly into bear market territory and increasing concerns for some that the U.S. could be heading toward a recession. Americans are already dealing with inflation and soaring gas prices. And if that's not enough, COVID-19 cases are rising again across the country. And President Biden said this morning, everyone should be concerned about monkeypox. And it's not a climate that makes governing very easy, especially 5 months away from the midterm elections. Here with me to discuss all of this is the president's top economic advisor, the director of the National Economic Council, Brian Deese.
And I will have the clip of Brian Deese explaining inflation and recession, and I will talk about the bad economy or the bad Biden economy and what may become of it between now and the midterms when I play that clip pretty soon. Or actually, that's the final newsmaker clip. Because I'm going to play the crazy Republicans before I get to the bad economy and covering that. But you saw actually the so-called liberal news media, the corporate news media, they spent a lot of time covering inflation and baby formula. You even saw Dana Bash there mentioned the whole monkeypox thing, which did come up in several of the news programs, though probably not quite the threat that COVID-19 has been, given that, well, I mean, there are 1 million Americans dead. We just passed the 1 million American mark, so I don't think hopefully that won't be where we go with monkeypox. But my one criticism of all those of the actual news programs is they didn't really cover the crazy Republicans part of the story, especially with the Pennsylvania election. I saw my live viewers, well, first I saw Tom Trask gave me a $10 super chat contribution, so I appreciate that. That helps me feel like it's worthwhile for me to put in all the time and effort that I do every Monday to put on this program. And then I saw Grumpy Cat saying that the real, what is more concerning is Mastriano winning the primary for Pennsylvania governor. And that's really true. That's a big story. This is a guy who wants to make everyone in Pennsylvania unregister all the registered voters in Pennsylvania and make them register again, and decertify voting machines, and he obviously is a 2020 election denier. The one news program, Fox News Sunday, kind of concentrated on that topic, but they downplayed the Republican crazy lying conspiracy part. And actually the best coverage of that was over on ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos, but it was later in the program. This is the extra news summary I promised you earlier. This is Martha Raddatz and their reporter Rick Klein discussing, giving you maps of, where are the crazy Republicans, and calling a lie, and specifically talking about the threat of the nominee, the Republican nominee for governor in Pennsylvania, Mastriano, I'll talk about that. And I actually used his picture in the thumbnail for this video because he's one of the crazy Republicans, and I'll talk about that a little more after we watch this really important extra news summary that I give great kudos to ABC, Martha Raddatz, and Rick Klein for putting together this week over here.
They'd like to call people who stand on the Constitution far right and extreme. I repudiate that. That is crap. Our view for Pennsylvania is one of hope and freedom, that people come here and walk as they see fit, not as some governor or some media hack sees fit. There's this movement here that's going to shock the state here on November 8th. It's going to be beautiful.
Pennsylvania's Doug Mastriano there giving his victory night speech after easily winning the Republican nomination for governor. Mastriano attended the January 6th rally and played a key role in efforts to try to overturn the election. ABC News political director Rick Klein is back at our midterm monitor ahead of another huge day of primary voting this Tuesday. And Rick, the process of democracy itself is among the big issues on the ballot.
Yeah, Martha, if you take a look at the states that are voting on Tuesday, it includes some really important states: Texas, Georgia. All four of these states that are voting, at least one candidate, and in most cases, far more than one candidate, deny the legitimacy of the last election. You're talking about candidates for governor, secretary of state, attorney general, Congress. All of them have a major role in overseeing an election or certifying results. And in many cases, we have election deniers running in those races. And if you zoom out to the full country, we've been working with our partners at 538 to identify as many candidates as possible who hold these views. And we have found at least 18 states where candidates are running that deny the legitimacy of the last election. 50-plus candidates endorse some version of the big lie. All of those candidates, Republicans.
And of course, some of those candidates have already won in some key states.
Yeah, look, this is just the battleground states, Martha. These are the states that are likely to determine control of the Senate and the presidency. These are the states where we also have election-denying candidates. Now, we just saw the results a couple weeks ago in Ohio. J.D. Vance is going to be the Republican nominee for Senate. He has said that Joe Biden's win was not legitimate. We don't know who the Senate nominee is going to be in Pennsylvania yet. We know that Trump is already spreading unfounded allegations about that election. We do know, though, that the candidate for governor is Doug Mastriano. And what's interesting about Pennsylvania is that in Pennsylvania, the governor gets to appoint the Secretary of State. So that means that Mastriano, who worked so hard to try to overturn that election, would be in a position to name the top election official in the state. He, of course, got the Trump endorsement in that election. And what's interesting about that is it's almost a prerequisite to get that endorsement, to have endorsed some version of the big lie. More than 70% of the candidates who have the Trump endorsement this year deny the legitimacy of the last election.
And that primary in Georgia on Tuesday might be the highest profile test of that big lie.
Martha, Donald Trump has made it his mission to try to defeat the Republican governor and secretary of state in Georgia after both of them stood by the certified results that showed that Joe Biden to be the winner. And what happened there was really interesting because Biden wins in 2020, and just a few weeks later, the Republicans do even worse than they did then in the runoff elections. This is the map that Senator Raphael Warnock used to ride to victory. And what happened was you saw voter turnout up here in some of the bluer parts of the Atlanta suburbs, Gwinnett, Rockdale, Henry County. And meanwhile, you had a lot of Republicans staying home there and through the central part of the state. They had been talked about and fed these lies for so many weeks that many Republicans seemed that they just were not engaged. This year, it could be that Democrats take advantage of a very similar dynamic when they've got Raphael Warnock running again, as well as Stacey Abrams for governor. And what's interesting about that night, that was January 5th of last year when both of Georgia's Senate seats went from the Republicans to the Democrats. Just one day later, the violent attack at the Capitol.
Absolutely fascinating, Rick. Thank you, as always.
So, yeah, that was actually kind of fascinating and was the best coverage of the crazy Republicans sort of taking over the Republican Party through various primaries or hoping to through primaries. They even had, like, guy running for, I think, governor in California. That was one of the 18 states with the 50 candidates, and they talked extensively about the Republican nominee for governor in Pennsylvania, Doug Mastriano, who was at the January 6th insurrection or whatever. He marched on the Capitol, but says he didn't break any laws. And that report also pointed out that in the state of Pennsylvania, the governor gets to appoint the Secretary of State, who's in charge of counting the votes. That's what Secretary of States or the Secretaries of State do in the states. And so that is like a really disturbing power for someone who doesn't really believe in the legitimacy of elections, apparently, or the last one, and believes in all the, also has some connection to QAnon from what I've heard. And so hopefully the Democrat who's running for governor in Pennsylvania, Josh Shapiro, I believe his name is, I think I heard someone say that they call him the Jewish JFK, or I don't even know what that's supposed to mean, but he even spent some money propping up or increasing the Republican support for Doug Mastriano because they thought he was so crazy he'd be easiest to beat, which is definitely a dangerous strategy. So especially for 2024, it would be devastating to have that dude Doug Mastriano as the governor of Pennsylvania when Trump's running and wants somebody to steal the election for him like he tried to last time. So that is the threat of the crazy Republicans that hopefully won't come to pass in Pennsylvania. But you can let me know what you think down in the comment section. And now I have two newsmaker crazy Republicans. The first is Ronna Romney McDaniel. Of course, she just to make it in the Trump Republican Party. Donald Trump, I think, forced her to drop the Romney. I think she's Mitt Romney's niece, if I remember correctly, the actual familial relationship. And here you see Martha MacCallum ask her about the tweet or it's not a tweet, it's a Truth Social tweet from Donald Trump saying that Dr. Oz should just declare victory before they finish counting the votes, but not in a bad way. Doesn't even really do a value judgment about how it's saying there are thousands of Republican votes we don't want to count. There are it includes the overseas military ballots. I thought Fox News cared about that, but I guess not. And then they do this thing that Fox News is doing more and more where they bring up what the Wall Street Journal says. But of course the Wall Street Journal is owned by the same company as Fox News, which they never tell you that anymore. They every day they use what the Wall Street Journal editorial page said this, and that's news. So anyway, I'll talk about all that a little more after we watch Martha MacCallum do kind of a softball interview with Ronna Romney McDaniel, although at least she did bring up the Truth Social tweet about stealing the election. And anyway, I'll talk about it with you a little more after we watch it together over here.
So let's talk first about Pennsylvania, the Senate race. It's about 1,100 votes apart between Dave McCormick and Dr. Oz. And President Trump spoke out on his Truth Social media site, and he said Dr. Oz should declare victory. It makes it much harder for them to cheat with the ballots that they, quote, just happened to find. Do you think that Dr. Oz should go ahead and declare victory?
I'm not going to speak for Dr. Oz. What I will say is the Republican legislature in Pennsylvania put forward an election integrity bill that Governor Wolf vetoed earlier this year. If that bill had been passed, we would not be in this situation. President Trump is right, and others, that we should not have no excuse absentee voting. This influx of mail-in voting is clearly showing that systems are not ready for that, and Pennsylvania is a case of that right now. And I think a lot of this lies at the feet of Governor Wolf, why we're having this disaster in Pennsylvania right now.
But so the former president is suggesting that another Republican who is supported by people who used to work in his administration is searching for votes or doing something that is untoward?
Well, the Pennsylvania Supreme Court ruled this year, and the RNC very much supports that ballots should not be counted without a date. I think that's the law in Pennsylvania. I think that should be followed. And we certainly do not think that ballots without dates should be counted, because how do you know when they came in? I think that's common sense, and that is definitely where the RNC and the GOP is.
All right. So if Dave McCormick were to win, will he be supported by President Trump, or is he going to keep saying, that he won this in a way that wasn't fair or that was fraudulent? It seems odd, doesn't it?
I think every Republican is going to be supporting the Republican nominee in these states, including President Trump. The RNC will be supporting. We do not want to see Fetterman, a Democrat socialist, the nominee on the Pennsylvania ticket, to be the senator. We know what's at stake with the balance of power. We see the disaster that our country is going through under Joe Biden. So we're going to rally around. Primaries are difficult. They're challenging. And then we come together afterwards and focus on who we really need to defeat, which is the Democrat.
So the Wall Street Journal this week looking at sort of the bigger picture of all of this and reminding people of the situation that happened in the runoff in Georgia in the Senate race there when the GOP lost those 2 key Senate seats, and with it, the majority in the Senate. And this is what they write. Angry about his own loss, Mr. Trump told GOP voters not to trust the process. That paved the way for President Biden's $1.9 trillion COVID package, the ensuing 8.5% inflation, and a liberal Supreme Court justice in waiting. Are they right about that, Rana?
Yeah, I disagree. I mean, President Trump was in Georgia, I think the day before the runoff in the Loeffler and Perdue races, down there to turn out the vote to take back those 2 Senate seats. The president has sent out many, many emails, and I have seen them calling on people to vote, saying the only vote that won't count is the one you don't cast. So he is absolutely a proponent of people getting out and voting, because we know what's at stake. We need 1 seat to win back the Senate and 5 to win back the House, and the American people are suffering, and we need Republicans to win in November.
But when you cast doubt on the process, we know from the polling that happened in Georgia that it made some people in certain districts very wary of participating in it. So whether or not he may have, supported it in terms of robocalls and other things and coming in the day before, some of that was sort of baked in the cake with the voters. At least that's what was revealed in the polling there.
Yeah, it's still in the Republican Party concerns about election integrity. 2020 was a different election. There was more mail-in ballots than ever. Many of the safeguards of voter ID were removed. And you've seen Georgia and Florida and Texas and other states pass comprehensive election reform that require voter ID for absentee ballots. That's just common sense. It's where most Americans are. They agree that we should show our ID to vote, and Democrats don't. And get rid of ballot harvesting and get rid of drop boxes and have same-day voting. These are common sense measures that will ensure integrity in the election. And the problem is, Martha, Democrats want the delta to be longer than ever. They want to vote earlier and then count the ballots as late as possible. So it's like a 2-month delta. When you have this type of delay in counting the ballots, it always creates concern with voters. And that's why Republicans have stepped up. The RNC has built the largest election integrity team across the country heading into 2022 in November. And this is something that's necessary to assure our voters that we're watching and we're going to make sure it's transparent and fair.
So let's take a look at Georgia, because a huge governor's race happening there on Tuesday, and we can take a look at the poll.
And I kept that playing so you can see Martha MacCallum had no follow-up to that like big line of bullshit from Romney McDaniel, where she let it, you saw they like started off with the Truth Social tweet. I guess it's not really a tweet because Donald Trump's not on Twitter, but he has his Truth Social app, and he said basically like, don't count the votes. Counting the votes is stealing the election. And by the end there, she's got letting Romney McDaniel get away with saying, oh, but the Republicans are the ones who believe in election integrity because we want to like have these limited IDs that we allow people to use to vote, which disproportionately disenfranchises people of color and young people and old people, and that I made videos about that years ago. That's like a well-established fact, and there's very little, well, anyway, I don't want to go off into all of that. And then you saw, like I said before, I showed the clip that Martha MacCallum used the Wall Street Journal as this authority without ever mentioning that the same company that owns Fox News owns the Wall Street Journal. And then there was like the premise of the question was, because Trump messed up the Senate election in Georgia in 2020, Democrats have the House and the Senate, and so they passed the $1.9 trillion COVID bill and the ensuing 8.5% inflation, although actually it's down to 8.3%, but I guess it peaked at 8.5%, but that is like kind of a fallacy that's what caused the inflation. There are like so many factors, and even the COVID packages that were passed by bipartisan majorities in the Congress and signed by President Trump were a lot bigger, and probably, to the extent spending is the reason we have, and there might be some part of it might be spending, but more, like I said earlier, the low interest rates and the generous money supply that is part of. And anyway, I don't want to go into all that economics again. I'll talk about it a little more when you hear Brian Dees in the final clip. That's the clip after next. But that was definitely bias from Fox News, as you would expect. Oh, and I got a second Super Chat contribution in the live comments from Lulu Girl, apologizing for not being here last week. I know people can't always make it every week, although I did notice you were not here last week, Lulu Girl, so I appreciate your regular attendance and your financial support and moral support and all that. But anyway, I have one more crazy Republican to show you before I get to the Biden economic advisor Brian Dees, and this is Rick Scott. He's on CBS News' Face the Nation, and here he's talking kind of both about the bad economy and the crazy Republicans. This is Margaret Brennan, and remember I mentioned when I showed the CBS News Face the Nation news summary and then talked with Anthony Salvanto about the CBS News poll, that one of the reasons I was showing it is because you'll see Rick Scott starts off the question from Margaret Brennan, if I recall, at the very beginning of this clip, which might be slightly cut off at the beginning, but her question is good morning. And then he starts off and talks about the news summary that I showed you earlier with the numbers on inflation, and he zeroes in on the bad ones for Biden. And Margaret Brennan, to her credit, brings up the bad ones for Republicans, that they're not trusted on the economy or inflation either. She also brings up the fact that Rick Scott wants to, in his plan that he put out, and he's the senator in charge of getting other senators elected, and he wants all the people who don't pay income tax to pay I think Margaret Brennan even says raises taxes about $1,000 on average for the 40% most poorest Americans or whatever. And she does ask about that, but I think I run this clip long enough. By the end, she lets Rick Scott get away with saying he's raising no taxes. And there's a little questioning about the crazy Republicans in here too. And this is the final crazy Republican before I get to the final newsmaker clip, Brian Dees, on the bad economy. And I will talk about it with you a little more after we watch Margaret Brennan do a pretty good job, but like I said, lets him skate a little bit on the taxes question. And I'll talk about that a little more after we watch together over here.
To you, Senator.
Good morning, Margaret. I think those numbers are consistent with what we've seen, that inflation is still the #1 issue in the country, and the president is slow to react, whether it's the border, whether it's inflation, whether it's gas prices, even Ukraine. I think the expectation is that whoever the president is gets ahead of the problems rather than behind the problems. So I think the election this fall is going to be about inflation. It's going to be about the effectiveness of the Biden administration. And I think it bodes well for Republicans.
Well, why do you think that? Because you just heard our poll, which shows Republicans don't really have much of an advantage on that specific issue. 51% of those polled trust the GOP on inflation. 49% trust Democrats. How do you advise Republicans to change that?
Well, I think it's important that, we talk about what we're going to do. And we explain the problem that the Biden administration has, that they don't react to, record gas prices and open border, things like this. But also we tell people what we're going to do to bring down inflation. We're going to balance the budget. We're going to start watching the dollars very closely. We're going to watch our spending. We're going to, expect the Federal Reserve to reduce their balance sheet. So I think we have to talk about the things that we're going to do to make it better for people. But if you go and look at the races around the country, Biden's numbers are really, really bad. And he's the face of the Democrat Party right now. But
so then if you want your candidates to be, Republican candidates to be talking about inflation, is it a waste of time for so many of them to talk about relitigating the 2020 election?
What I've seen, Margaret, is people want to know that the election is going to be fair and their vote's not going to be diluted. So as I go around the country and talk to people, what they're hoping is that Republicans will make sure that there's voter ID, there's no ballot harvesting, signatures have to match, and that's when I talk to people, that's what they care about.
So you don't want them to talk about 2020.
About what happened in 2020.
Sorry, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, no, Margaret. There's clearly people that are still concerned about what happened in 2020, and they would like the facts to come out. And they want to know what happened, why it happened. Well, they want to know that exactly what happened. If were there problems, exactly what happened. They'd like to know that, but also they also want to make sure we win in 22. So they want to make sure that we're going to make sure their vote's not diluted. So I think you have to talk about making sure people understand what happened in 2020, but also make sure they know that you're going to focus on making sure that 2022 is a fair election.
Okay, just to be abundantly clear, you have recognized President Biden is the duly elected president of the United States, correct?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So let's just move on from there. So in terms of the things you think Republicans should be talking about in inflation, you put forward this 11-point plan. One of the things you're suggesting is to end all imports from China. Isn't that going to add to price inflation?
Well, I think what we've got to do is we've got to figure out how to decouple from China. Now, it's going to take a while to do that. But if you look at what they want to do, they're sending fentanyl in this country. We had over 100,000 people die of drug overdose last year. They never comply with any trade agreements. They've never complied with the World Trade Association. So organization. So what we've got to do is we've got to start building American jobs. We've got to get American manufacturing back. And when we do that, one, our wages will go up. We'll have more jobs in this country, and people want to buy American products. And there's other countries to do business with.
Sure. Okay. So it's a long-term goal that's not actually banning Chinese imports now. Let me ask you about something else you talk about. The Institute on Taxation and Economic Policy says your plan you put forward would increase taxes by more than $1,000 on average for the poorest 40% of Americans. Senate Republican leader Mitch McConnell said this.
We will not have as part of our agenda a bill that raises taxes on half of the American people and sunsets Social Security and Medicare within 5 years.
So if your fellow Republicans don't support this alternative you're putting forward, who does?
Well, first off, it's Rick Scott's plan. I believe we ought to have a plan for how we go forward. I'm a business guy. I created plans in my business life. I created plans when I was governor. But here's the way I look at it. My mom told me I had to have skin in the game. And what she meant by that is I had to get to work and participate in the American dream. When you get a job, you pay payroll taxes, you pay income taxes, you buy things, you pay sales tax, you buy a house, you pay property taxes. We have very low labor participation right now. I want people back to work. And with regard to Medicare and Social Security, think about this. We have got to be honest with the American people and come up with solutions. Medicare goes bankrupt in 4 years. Social Security goes bankrupt in 12 years. We're not talking about that. I want to fix those programs. I believe in those programs, and people rely on those programs.
You want Congress to review them every 5 years?
Those. Well, think about it. We do the military every year. We ought to be looking at. I mean, people expect us. It's our job. If you get elected, it's your job to go through and figure out how you fix things. That's our job. We do the military every year, and we fight over what we should do to make sure we have the most lethal military. We ought to be honest with the American people. Here's the things we're going to do to make sure you get your Medicare, make sure you get your Social Security. So I will never raise a tax. I cut taxes more than 100 times, but I'm going to make sure we fix and make sure the Medicare programs and Social Security work.
So Margaret Brennan then goes on to cross-examine him on the whole Medicare and Social Security stuff. But you saw right at the end there, he says, I will never raise a tax. And he dodged the question where he said part of his plan is for the many Americans don't pay income tax. They pay payroll tax and sales tax, like he said in his answer. And when they go to work, they sometimes, but you actually up to a certain amount, especially, I can't remember the exact number, but I think it's even like up to $50,000 a year for couples or for individuals, or I can't remember what it is. But for, like they said, the bottom 40% of American taxpayers don't pay income tax because of, when you first start going to work, you actually get extra money. You get the earned income tax credit, and that, decreases as you make more and more money, but it takes a while before you actually have to pay in, and that's actually good to not tax labor as much as it should be. Actually, the capital gains taxing capital would be more progressive anyway, but that is really regressive what Rick Scott has proposed as part of his, 11-point plan, and Margaret Brennan brought it up, but I guess, did she pull like a Chuck Todd? Because Chuck Todd was off this week. There was really no follow-up on that, although she, like I said, you can watch the whole thing at the link under sources in the video description, where you go to the CBS News Face the Nation YouTube channel, and the whole interview, as well as the whole program split into clips, is available there. And Margaret Brennan does follow up on the Social Security Medicare thing, his idea to sunset those so they have to be reauthorized, which that sounds like a really bad idea if you want those programs to stay alive. But then she didn't follow up at all on how he's going to raise taxes on so many Americans. And I thought Republicans didn't believe in raising taxes, and she's letting him get away with that. So that's my criticism of Margaret Brennan there. And then finally, for people out there who want to be more optimistic about the economy, who want to hear, what is the director of Biden's National Economic Council, how does he explain inflation and also the threat of recession? I mean, theoretically, we might be in a recession right now, because a recession, by definition, is, and we're so geared towards capitalism, they call it negative growth. It's 2 consecutive quarters of negative growth, but negative growth, that's not even a thing. It's contraction, right? It's when the economy contracts for 2 consecutive quarters in a row, that is the definition of recession. And when the numbers came out for the first quarter of 2022, I think it was the economy contracted by 1.5%. It's possible that will be revised upwards, and most of the people who are predicting a recession, and kind of the stock market is dropping, because the stock market's predicting how the economy is going to do in 6 months, or how people think the economy is going to do in 6 months. And so the stock market can predict a recession coming in 6 months. But I don't know, there's like this old joke about like the stock market has predicted like 10 of the last 3 recessions or something, because it like over predicts, because they don't always come when the stock market thinks they're going to come. But like I said, we might be in a recession if when the numbers come out for this quarter, the second quarter, there's contraction again. That would be a recession, because that's what the numbers were for last quarter. That would be the 2 consecutive quarters. But that would be, negative 1.5% is not really deep recession. And like I said, most economists are predicting a recession. It's like recession in a way is the way to get rid of inflation. Inflation means the economy is running too fast, and then the Federal Reserve raises interest rates and makes money tighter, and maybe some other, who knows what the Congress might do, but those are like some of the main levers. And they were talking about getting rid of the Chinese tariffs. That would be, because that would lower the prices on all those goods, the opposite of what Rick Scott was talking about. But anyway, so the point is that I was trying to make is, because inflation is a problem, you put brakes on the economy, and if you like brake too much, it slows down so much that it contracts and you get a recession. Sometimes, I mean, a recession is like the antidote for inflation, and it's just painful for a lot of people as the way to fix the problem. It happened in like the Reagan administration, and Reagan is like the Republican god, and kind of the first years of the Reagan administration were a recession to break inflation. Alan Greenspan, I think it was Alan Greenspan, but anyway, you can let me know in the comment section if you know if it was Alan Greenspan. But now I'm going to show you the at the Fed who did that for Ronald Reagan. But this is the director of Biden's National Economic Council explaining what he thinks is going to happen. I guess this is sort of like the best shine you can put on the economy from the top Biden economist on CNN's State of the Union with Dana Bash yesterday over here.
This morning, let's start with the S&P 500 dipping into bear market territory on Friday. It did rebound slightly. The Dow just experienced its longest losing streak in nearly a century. So yes or no, is the U.S. falling into a recession?
Well, there are always risks, but here's where I think we are. Our economy is in a transition from what has been the strongest recovery in modern American history to what can be a period of more stable and resilient growth that works better for families. There's no doubt we face serious global challenges right now, inflation first and foremost among them, and it's hitting families hard. But there's also no doubt that the United States is in a better position than any other major country around the world to address inflation without giving up all the economic gains that we've had. And that's because of the strength of our recovery. We have the strongest job market. We have businesses investing. We have Americans actually increasing their savings and paying down their debt.
So given all of that, are you confident that the U.S. can avoid a recession?
In this transition, the United States is in a better place than any other country because of those strengths. If you think about where we have come from, we have navigated through Delta and Omicron. We've navigated through the gyrations coming from Putin's war in Ukraine. And still, the American consumer, the American business has been resilient through this period. And so if we keep our focus on bringing inflation down in a way that actually helps families.
But you're not saying no.
Look, there are always risks, but we feel very good about where the United States is, particularly when you look on the global landscape.
Okay, let's talk about inflation. It is still near the highest levels in 4 decades. I want to play what President Biden said about this issue almost a year ago compared to what he's saying now.
By the way, talk of inflation. The overwhelming consensus is going to pop up a little bit and then go back down.
I want every American to know that I'm taking inflation very seriously, and it's my top domestic priority.
Brian, how did the administration get that so wrong?
Look, a lot of things have changed over the course of the last year, and we've dealt with a lot of unexpected challenges. As I mentioned, the Delta wave of COVID, Omicron on top of that, and more recently, Putin's invasion of Ukraine, which has sent gyrations through global energy markets. What's most important for the American people to understand right now is they have a president who is making clear, as you just played, that inflation is his top economic priority. And that means a couple of things. First, we need to give the Fed the space and the independence to do its job, which is to get inflation under control. Second, we need to lower costs for families, make things more affordable for them during this economic transition. And third, we need to reduce the federal deficit. If we reduce the federal deficit, we'll help to reduce price pressures in the economy. We've made a lot of progress on that because of the president's policies, but we can do more.
And that all makes sense, and also kudos to Dana Bash for playing what Biden said like about a year ago about, inflation was transitory and how come, they were wrong. And he answered, what was it? Then we had Delta, then we had Omicron, then we had Ukraine, and they all disrupted the supply chain and increased prices, and then gas prices, and everything he said there is true. And Biden is engaging in deficit reduction. I was talking about modern monetary theory earlier and how decreasing government spending, or the amount of money that the government puts into the economy, that's a way that if there's inflation, that's something the government can do, and that's money the government puts into the economy is the deficit, the amount that more that the government spends than it takes in. And so Biden actually has done a great job of cutting the deficit from the Trump years. They were just like rampant overspenders because Republicans decided when they were in power they didn't really care about fiscal responsibility anymore, and Democrats couldn't really stop them, and some of course liked to spend, and so there was like a bipartisan spending bills that with nobody really caring about any of that. And now that there's inflation, one of the things you need to do under, like I said, modern monetary theory is decrease the amount of money the government's putting into the economy. And Brian Deese, everything he said there makes a lot of sense. I'm optimistic that there are rational people in the Biden administration working on the problem, and a lot of it, he mentioned how you have to give time to the Fed because they're the main instrument that are, they're sort of an independent federal agency that controls the money supply and the interest rates that also are, like I said, the main levers to fix this problem. And it may lead to recession. It may not lead to recession. It's been a long time. Well, there was like this weird recession during COVID that was like down and up, partially because of all that big spending that's led to the inflation. That's one of the reasons we've had as strong a recovery in the economy as we have. And anyway, I think I've talked about economics enough, and I see you're all talking about it in the live comments along the way. So the main point is, if the economy is bad, whatever the reason, the president gets the blame for it. If it's good, whatever the reason, like Trump took credit for the little bit of the lowering of the unemployment rate after like this long lowering over all the Obama years, and he takes credit for the little tail end. But he was president when we had the lowest black unemployment and lowest female unemployment and lowest Hispanic he said that so many times. That was one of Trump's gifts, and he gets the credit if it happens when he's president, even though it's not really the result of his policies. And Biden gets the blame for the inflation that's the result of a lot of extraneous factors. But that's just the way politics works. And if the economy is at a place where people feel stressed by it at the November midterms, it's going to make it a lot more likely that more crazy Republicans get elected. There are some opposing forces, like the craziness itself may make some of the candidates unelectable. I mean, hopefully, I don't understand how Republicans vote for a candidate who doesn't believe in democracy, wants to take the elections out of the hands of the voters and put it in the hands of the Secretary of State to create Trump electors. I've heard Doug Mastriano, the Republican nominee for governor, talk right after the night he was nominated, say that's 20 electoral votes or 22 electoral votes or whatever it is Pennsylvania's worth. And it's it doesn't matter who they vote for. Republicans a lot have started voting for candidates who only believe in democracy when they win, and that's pretty ridiculous. So anyway, whether the bad economy is going to cause those crazy Republicans to be elected in strong enough numbers to actually tip our democracy. Even, there are a lot of non-democratic features to our democracy already. Some of them are good, like the liberal democracy parts that protect our rights from the majority, but other parts where, like, big empty pieces of land get the same number of votes as states with millions of people, like, Wyoming and California have the same number of senators. That doesn't protect anyone's rights. That protects the rights of a big piece of open land with no people in it, or very few people. That part, anti-democratic part, doesn't really make much sense. And anyway, now I'm rambling, and I'm going to finish the show, even though I could ramble I could talk about this for a long time, but I appreciate all of you who showed up for the live show. I appreciate my recorded show viewers. I appreciate those super chat contributions during the show that I already thank Tom Trask and Lulu Girl for. I will be back next Monday and definitely through the November midterms. I'm thinking I might stay longer. I talked about how I've had a few extra patrons join up recently. That's one of the things that is like the most dependable monthly income. The people who, for like $5 or $10 a month, say you want me to keep making videos. Like after the November midterms, there's a link right under the video player that if you want to become a monthly patron, and if you give like $5 or $10, I will give you. I have this hashtag LiberalViewer weatherproof vinyl sticker that you can see I have stuck right here. I don't have one out here. And then I also have these got these ACLU constitutions I send out. So you get the sticker and the constitution if you for the $5 or $10 level, or even if you just want to do it one time, there's a link down to PayPal for that. So yeah, that's one of the things that I'm looking at to decide whether to keep doing the live stream or transitioning to something else or whatever. So anyway, I appreciate all of you who show up and give me support for continuing to spend 8 or 10 hours a week putting together this live stream about the corporate news media and our democracy on the brink, I was going to say, is my title last week, and I was kind of explaining how the bad economy electing crazy Republicans might make that democracy on the brink go over the brink, was the point I was making in that long rant that I cut myself off on. And I did promise you a bonus Dash clip, and this is a clip I took this morning. You can see actually Fox News up on the TV in the background. I tried to take this shot so you could see Dash licking a plate that I had just eaten from, which is a regular Dash the cat thing to do while we are yes, Lulu Girl Dash is. I'm about to give the Dash clip. It's like I said, it's kind of a weird angle on Dash. But this is Dash and I are watching Fox News, wondering, is Martha MacCallum going to actually ask Louisiana Senator Bill Cassidy about his weird statement that, they have to correct the Louisiana population for the black people in their maternal mortality statistics? And I already answered that question. He doesn't ask, but here's Dash and I waiting to see if that happens, and before I finish the show over here.
Now, since it's really gotten worse, they've been able to move relatively quickly. They could have moved quickly 3 months ago, and this never would have happened.
The desperation that these moms are telling the media about, the way that they feel. There was one who said that she thinks of nothing else but trying to find the formula for her children. So that is going to continue for a while, so we'll see about that. You have real concerns about the economy, and especially U.S. energy. You have 10 ways that...
So there you see, that was this morning, Dash licking my plate while we were checking for Fox News bias, and we found it. Dash and I found the Fox News bias. So anyway, that's the end of the program. Thanks for joining me. I'll be back next Monday. I'm still thinking about making that Star Trek video. I did take some of the clips. We'll see what happens during the next week or so if I still put the effort in. But until I upload some other video, or until next Monday, I guess I will be seeing all of you around the internet.